Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ion Canon podcast, your home for in-depth discussion on the lore of the High Republic and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew. I'm coming to you, as always, from Underworld North Studio in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And I'm joined from across the continent by your friend and mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing good. It was a nice sunny day this morning, but now it's raining. But outside of that, I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, it's I got outside just once today. It was sunny but cool here in Toronto. I just got up for a nap. So here's how this is gonna go. Fandom. Talking about fandom. It's a tricky and amorphous concept. We have ideas of what it means, but those might be contradictory or at least distinct. The concept of a Star Wars fan raises fascinating questions since our fandom contains many groups within it, partly based on age, gender, or other demographics, and especially in a franchise spanning in our real world 48 years, in universe multiple centuries. There are many pockets of groups preferring one era over another, and sometimes one era at the expense of another. So this week we break down some of these camps and possibly chart the limits of fandom itself. We're gonna get the plugs out of the way before we do that. Follow us on mostly on Blue Sky at Iron Cannon. Also, of course, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at Iron Cannon Pod. Still doing a little bit over there. Also, if you prefer audio right after this podcast, I will pop this right up on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So let us know if you're listening, tuning in on the audio feeds. Check that out. Look up Ion Cannon podcast. Don't look up Ion Cannon. Those will be the old. That's the old feed. Ion Cannon podcast is what you want to find there. The non-toxic alliance. Like to see that. There we go. There we go. We speaking of alliances and whatnot, we are proudly part of the Star Wars Underworld podcast network. Here on the Underworld YouTube channel, we have YouTube memberships. We have super chats. So if you comment, as you just saw, we will get to your comment as soon as we can. If you super chat us, if you're willing to support the channel financially, materially, then we'll get your comment to the top of the pile. Of course, we also have YouTube memberships, so you're grateful for any support you are able and willing to provide. Also, the Star Wars Underworld Discord server, probably most importantly, Star Wars Underworld Discord server, pretty active community every day. I see notifications, I see things, conversations going on in that. Joel, you and Ben really keeping that going strong, and much regulars in there as well. Any events happening recently? Any events coming up soon?
This week we're gonna do a game night. We're gonna be playing Star Wars Hunters because that unfortunately is gonna be logged off soon. So we want to get as much fun of that as possible. Last week we watched not one, not two, but three whole episodes of Star Wars Rebels. We watched Secret Cargo season 3 and season 4's In the Name of the Rebellion parts 1 and 2. And then Ben had to leave, but he left the computer on, so the Disney Plus thing kept playing. So we just kept watching Rebels until everyone left. I think he was on the episode where Kanan was gonna die when everyone was
Spoiler
gone.
alert.
Walked off. Spoiler alert! Sorry, spoiler for a
Okay.
show that's been out forever.
I know. Yeah, that's exciting. How'd that go? What was the turnout for that like?
Oh, it's pretty good. There were like me, Ben, and a couple others, and it got mentioned in another Discord. So yeah, just kind of talking about. Actually, what's interesting about Secret Cargo is the speech. Isn't we actually don't? Though there's two things because somebody brought this up on a different Discord when they rewatched it. First off, Mon Mothma is not escaping from Coruscant; she's escaping from Chandrilla. So if we're going to get the Andor Rebels timeline correct, it looks like she makes the big speech on Coruscant, goes to Chandrilla, and then it seems like she's escaping from Chandrilla. So there's a bit of a gap there. And then the speech we actually see in the show is not the speech against the Emperor. It's the speech saying, "Hey, rebel cells, come together.
Yeah.
We got to do the thing." So I'm actually now curious how intertwined the Rebels Andor connection will be, if at all. If there's like a gap between going to Coruscant, then going to Chandrilla, then meeting up with the Ghost Crew, because there might actually not be much of a connection as we originally thought. But I'm sure something like Star Wars Explained will probably eventually make a video about how these two things intertwine.
I know. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
So that was fun, just to kind
Mm.
of see that, and it's always fun to see the Sawmon moment with Saw's big head.
Yes.
Good.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. I'm sure there's the folks at Lucasfilm figured this out, the story group and them, or just the folks at Lucasfilm overall have just figured out when these things take place.
Mhm.
I think the point is the story beats
Right.
connect, and the whole the switch move from Mon Mothma
Mhm.
trying to use the Senate to her resigning the Senate and saying gotta burn it all down. Um,
Right.
yeah, we'll get into that a little bit, but yeah, definitely those kinds of things you can see on the Star Wars Underworld Discord server. So the link in the description down below if you want to join in. Last but not least, Track Freedom Comics reviews. So every Wednesday, right here on the Underworld YouTube channel and Facebook and Twitch, and I on Canon Twitch. Chris Abbott and I break down the Star Wars comics that came out that week, that came out that day. This week, only one book again, High Republic Adventures number 16. Going back to Ariadu, the Battle of Ariadu continuing on, going apace, and yeah, we'll dive right into that. So that's this Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, right here on the Underworld YouTube channel and Facebook and Twitch and on Canon Twitch. So please do check that out. All right, let's move right along. Talking about this week in Star Wars, Joel. What do we have this week? No, I think you're muted or something. There we go.
Am I good? Am I
Yeah, you're
back?
good.
Okay.
Yeah, go on.
Well, this thing I have two things. One, me and my dad have. I got my dad to start watching Andor with me.
Okay.
I put it on the background of our TV, and he got interested. So it's like we yesterday we just finished One Way Out, so that was good.
Nice.
So that's a small
Great
thing. But that's
episode.
actually something that happened this week.
Yeah.
But my thought this week of Star Wars was I
Mhm.
was talking. Dominic mentioned Mask of Fear on
Mhm.
the Underworld, because he did his review on
Yeah,
his Substack. Go check it out.
yeah, it's
Um,
great. Mhm.
and he mentioned that it's not just a good Star Wars book; it's just a good book in general. It sort of transcends
Mhm.
the Star Warsness of it all. But I was thinking about that the other day, and I was thinking to myself, would Mask of Fear be a good book to share with somebody who was getting into Star Wars books? And I kind
Mhm.
of had two thoughts on this. On the one hand, it is really well written. It's a really solid
Mhm.
book, just in terms of prose, pacing, all that good stuff. It's very timely, of course. So I thought, so there's that aspect to it. But then on the other side, I feel like your appreciation for this book wouldn't be as hard hitting unless you kind of knew a little bit of like who the heck Mon, Saw, and Bale even were.
Mm.
I mean, we all kind of jokingly say this is the Mon Mothma book, but it is, and our friend Ash. That's why our friend Ash really loves this book. This
Yeah.
book is her book. It's just everything's been building to this in Andor season 2. Um, and Saw Gerrera. That builds off the stuff from the Onderon arc of
Mhm.
Clone Wars, and like Bail Organa has always sort of been a bit of a mainstay of Star Wars. Though they don't actually appear that much, they're also kind of a mainstay. Like
Mm.
we know who they are. Um,
Mhm.
so it's like, okay, if you've only seen the 9 films, the 9, or even just the 6 films, if we're
Yeah.
dealing with with Lucas's stuff, would this book work for you? And I feel like it's sort of like a 50-50 thing. Because on the one hand, it's really well written,
Mhm.
and it's really topical. So
Yeah.
there's that element, but also it's like I do think you get a little bit more of an appreciation when you kind of already know who Mon, Saw Gerrera, and Bale are, and you kind of
Yeah.
have lived with them. Like that's how what I've always. That's at least for me. Like I kind of can enjoy both, but like the goodness of the book, but also like I've known who Mon, Saw, and Bale are all the time, and this
Mhm.
is like just my deep. I'm getting even deeper with those characters, so
Mm.
it's a catch-22. I wouldn't know if this is like if I would like if I would necessarily put this in terms of like here's like a good starter package for you in
Mm.
terms of getting into Star Wars literature, compared to some others which I would definitely have on my list. But
Yeah.
it's certainly something I'm 50-50 on. I'm definitely not one way or the
Mm.
other. So that's been my thought about this
Yeah.
book.
It's a good question. I don't when you bring it up, I'd say I know I'd strongly. think if you've seen Revenge of the Sith, if you've seen A New Hope, and if you've seen Rogue One, if you've seen Rogue One, then you'll be fine to get the background and uh what this novel is, because it's so connected to the real world in so many ways. I mean, even at dinner yesterday, Ash, Dom, and I were talking about this book, and just after Toronto Comic Con, and yeah, that how much of Alexander Freed was basing kind of the way the Empire operates off of Project 25, for example,
Mhm.
or there's the feeling of the loss of democratic norms. I think it could actually really resonate with a lot of people, just the way I think Andor is going
Mhm.
to resonate with a lot of people. That is part of what Dom was getting at, uh, in its connection to the real world. I think because of its intricacy, because of its political depth, I do think a more casual fan who's at least again seen Revenge of the Sith, A New Hope, and Rogue One, uh, will be fine to know. So I mean, Return of the Jedi definitely helps too. But uh, yeah, I mean, even if you've just seen Rogue One, that'll be fascinating. If you've just seen Rogue One and Revenge of the Sith and Rogue One, because you got to know the Clone Wars has such a huge part of
Right.
this novel. But yeah, I think it could actually have a wider appeal. I don't know, it'd be interesting.
Maybe,
What do you
yeah,
think?
that's true. I always for kind of never consider like where like I always
Yeah,
think like starting the spin-off movies and whatnot after you watch the
yeah,
saga. So yeah, I can see that. I think you may certainly if you've seen everything on screen at that point, I think
yeah.
you
No,
would
definitely.
probably be fine. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good point.
but I don't think you need to have seen Rebels.
No,
That definitely helps too, right? I mean, if you've seen Secret Cargo and the Name of the Rebellion, that definitely helps. But yeah,
yeah,
so
good point.
uh, yeah. Speaking of Toronto Comic Con 2025, that's my week in Star Wars. Is yeah, this past the weekend went to Comic Con, and good to hang out with Dom and Ash and a few others, a few other friends. Yeah, and especially so the main Star Wars. I mean, this was a lighter con. It's always a bit smaller. This one was felt even lighter. The only main Star Wars, well, there were two Star Wars guests. One was Dave Dorman. I don't know, Joe, if you know Dave Dorman. He drew the covers for Dark Empire, I
Ooh,
believe.
nice.
So
Okay,
yeah, it's
that's
Dark Empire,
cool.
and so one of our buddies got whole one, got a whole what's it called? When they're collected.
Oh,
Oh
cool.
man,
Variants
no, when they collect the whole issue, like the issues 1 to 6.
trade.
No, I forget. I'm blanking. My brain is blanking on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, the issues 1 to 6, he got them all signed by Dave,
Nice.
who's a neat chatting with him about AI and different kind of trends in art today. But so that was interesting. But then the main event for Star Wars was Manny Jacinto,
Oh, nice.
Vancouver's own Manny Jacinto, coming to Toronto, talking about how the only thing about Toronto he really knows about is the Raptors and some other folks. But yeah, it was interesting hearing him talk about, well, one of the big bits he didn't say, obviously didn't say anything about season 2 of the Acolyte because it doesn't exist, but talked about how, yeah, there's the online discourse of this show, but then there's all the interactions he gets at cons and how much people love that show, and just the love that he gets for his performance in that show. Uh, there is still a fan energy in the real world, right, Joel? This is to your point about how the internet is not a real place. Manny Jacinto definitely feels the love for this show, that it's uneven. It has its issues, but has some real moments of brilliance, including the action. And he also talked about how he did all of his own stunts in
Oh,
that
nice.
show. He based it off of the drunken master who then snaps into the incredibly disciplined, strong uh, Dark Lord. He so yeah, his training
Classic.
regime. Talking about his training regime, how is full day training with sports science, medical science,
Oh, nice.
cardio, and weight training, and all the stuff, all the things. And then talking about his his lightsaber, and how, when he and Leslie were developing this character, they, talking about how he, Kymer, or the stranger, he would play dirty. He was going to play dirty, and so to have this extra blade that comes out from his hilt, having that deception, that subterfuge, that, yeah, just not following any rules because it's the dark side. You don't respect your opponent, or um, you don't kind of respect any rules of engagement. You don't have any moral scruples about anything. You just do what you got to do, and uh, yeah, that just character through action. So maybe that's part of why, thinking about this, why the action in that show is so fantastic.
It
Part
is.
because it's so reflective of character, um, whether it's Soul or even Yord and Jackie, and their gruesome deaths, and
Very.
especially Chimera, or Chimera the Stranger, reflective of character. And so, yeah, it was a good panel, good Q&A. Yeah. Otherwise, there wasn't too much merch. I guess you can talk about Black Series and how it's overpriced or it's on the way out. I don't know. A little bit of conversations there, but with our buddy Figure and Dan Johnson, gotta mention him. So, um, yeah, pretty good con. My Taylor Swift panel with Ash went great. Was
Hooray!
really, really happy about that. Really good set of goal of getting through the material clearly without rushing, but getting through it all and getting to a complete panel, presenting the material completely. And so that meant I had to say, okay, this I'm gonna say, and this I'm gonna have as notes in case I need to fill more time. Really fun performance by Din of F105, our friend Din, of a cover of a Taylor Swift cover. Um, so that was, yeah, it was pretty good. We're in the works of getting it up onto YouTube. I will let you all know when that happens. I will make sure to broadcast it out because, yeah, I feel pretty proud of it. It's interesting. Cons nowadays for me are, yeah, about going and, learning, seeing Star Wars, seeing other um see, other creatives and whatnot, consuming content, if I can put it that way. But cons are also primarily now about making content and about seeing friends, and especially about seeing friends. And so
Mhm.
that, yeah, so in that way, successful Toronto Comic Con 2025. Thanks as always to Informa and Touchwood PR, for giving us, the Underworld folks, giving Dom me a ride. And yeah, definitely looking forward to Fan Expo Canada 2025. So there you go. I don't know, Joel, if you have anything to respond or add or thoughts, especially about Chimera.
No, I mean, I've never heard anybody go up to a person and say, "You show sucked." Yeah, I mean, maybe it has
Sure.
happened, but I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
think anyone who hates the Acolyte to that degree will ever have the gall to do that.
You never know.
Maybe you never know.
So
You never know, but as of yet, no one has done it. So
sure.
good. Yeah. No, I got nothing. I hope one day that Matthew, you and I can host a panel on a
Yeah.
comic con. That'd be
Yeah.
cool.
That's the dream. There we go.
Yeah.
Well, we gotta,
We can talk about
yeah.
canon.
Yes. What is canon? There you go. I mean, celebration. I'm thinking Star Wars Celebration 2027. Right there in Orange County. I'm pretty
I
sure
hope
it's
so.
a
If
big guess. That's the going guess right there in Orange County. Certain convention center near a certain little amusement park.
if we can, then we'll try to make it happen. Yeah.
There we go. But speaking of Star Wars Celebration, speaking of cons,
Hmm.
here's a good segue. Here we go. There is a Star Wars Celebration coming up. It is a Pacific Coast party. It's just that the Pacific Coast is the East Coast of Japan. And so we are, yeah, it is just over a month away. So Star Wars
Woo!
Celebration Japan, just over a month away. In fact, a month tomorrow. Month tomorrow is Friday, April 18th. Good Friday, April 18th. So first of all, to say the schedule of Star Wars Celebration Japan has come out. It is on StarWars.com. You can check it out there. And on Friday, April 18th, 2025, 2 p.m. local time, on the Galaxy stage, the Lucasfilm Publishing panel. And the description they have is join us in Japan for the latest publishing news from the prequel trilogy to the sequel trilogy and beyond, including news on the grand finale of the High Republic with Adam Christopher, Tessa Gratton, Mark Guggenheim, Lydia Kang, Ethan Sachs, Phil Sostak, Alyssa Wong, and Marvel's CB Cebulski. There's some interesting names in there. First of all, it looks like they're definitely combining all novels and all comics together. Definitely, some comic artists, even just the reference book. Phil Sostak does the reference books. The Marvel Star Wars editor, CB Cebulski, he's going to be there. Adam Christopher being there, that was the one that kind of piqued my interest.
Piqued a few people's interest too, so you're not alone.
Because that's the first time he's been on a celebration panel. What's he got going on? What's he up his sleeve? I know he just announced a Doctor Who audio drama. But beyond that, what's going on with Star Wars? I suspect he has a novel to announce. My spidey sense. The force is telling me this, that he's a novel to announce. Tessa Gratton, we know her Acolyte novel is coming out soon. Acolyte tie-in. Mark Guggenheim, his Jedi Knight series going on. Lydia Kang, that's also interesting. Lydia Kang, Ethan Sachs' Poe Dameron comic. Alyssa Wong. I mean, that's the thing is so Lydia Kang and Alyssa Wong have written High Republic. So maybe that's kind of looking back. Maybe Alyssa's got something else down the pipe. I don't know. But yeah, it's interesting that it's both interesting. It's a little concerning, disappointing that there isn't a separate High Republic panel, that there's the separate Marvel Comics panel. The usual range of publishing panels, book paper panels. It all seems to be folded into one. There's a separate manga panel, which is neat. But yeah, this seems to be it for publishing. So definitely check out Chris Abbott. He's going to be there for sure. But yeah, the Adam Christopher seems to be the biggest ear perking, eye perking news here. What was your reaction to this description and to the list of the folks?
Well, someone brought up, and let me see if I can find it because it might be in books. But anyway, I'll keep talking. I think I think Adam Christopher is sort of the big one here for sure in terms of people being here. Because he had another book in 2 years. Also, and I was wondering, like what could he be doing? Is he doing a follow up to Shadow of the Sith? Is he gonna do something else? Maybe a sequel trilogy thing? And here's the question: what are the chances of look back, but time to look to the future? Old Republic. We got Exum Penchar, the Sith dude from the past, who was during those times. Is it? Are they good? It's time to do it. It's time to go back to the battles of the Old Republic.
Interesting.
Is that gonna happen? Or maybe my dream of an Enric Pride spinoff, because I think he'd be interesting character to do too. That's kind of interesting. I found it interesting. They also said from the prequel to the sequel and beyond. So hopefully that means more sequel content coming up. There is. I thought I saw something about like a YA novel for the 10th anniversary of Force Awakens in September. That might not be announced officially. Which I think would be kind of funny. I think would be kind of interesting if all the Revenge of the Sith at 20 stuff goes up to like May or in April when we culminate with the big re-release in theaters, which I have not been able to find tickets to yet. So
they haven't released them yet.
Okay, good.
I'm looking like mad. Don't worry.
You tell me, because I got a van ordered, ready to go.
Nice. That's great.
just in case it's far away. So
Yeah.
you text me.
Sure.
But but it's like, well, okay, we do that for the first half of the month, and then when we get to December, which was when Force Awakens come out, then we'll kind of maybe have
Sure.
more Force Awakens
Yeah.
adjacent stuff to balance it out for the year. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I'm interested in that. There's also another panel I think that day I'm also interested in. I want to talk about too
Mm-hmm.
for a second. But yeah, I guess to me, Adam Christopher is the big one because like
Yeah.
he's got some interesting stuff. And also good to see Alyssa Want back, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
always a good sign for Afra. We don't really know what her future's like yet, but
Yeah.
we know she's alive, so
Oh yeah.
she's doing stuff. We just don't know what they're gonna do yet, but I'm sure
Yeah.
it'll be stuff.
We'll see. I mean, yeah, I don't know. My gut isn't saying, I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea. So just my gut that Alyssa isn't writing a new Afra. I would love it. The run is the pinnacle, the quintessential Charlie Afra is Alyssa Wong's run. But them and Lydia are the two High Republic authors on this. So there. Oh, I guess Tessa Gratton's in there too, of course. Yeah, I do. With Adam, yeah, I like that Enterprise idea. My sense is there's an appetite for more kind of road to the sequel trilogy type things. Oh, not obviously not with that banner because it happened 6 years ago.
Just tell a book that just happens to be closely tied to.
Yeah, so an Enric Pride story that would be good.
He
Something,
works
but
for
like,
me because
yeah,
sorry, I just want to say he works because he
yeah,
is one of the few people in the First Order who kind
yeah,
of like is aware of like there's more of the Snoke
sure.
guy than just dark side, or
Yeah,
and he's aware of the Exegol plot by the end. So that
sure.
could go.
Like I'm thinking, what was he doing other than what Greg Pak is really down?
Right.
This bumbling sort of sniveling. Yes, Lord Vader. How high, Lord Vader? Type of kid. To what does he end up doing in the in the reign of the Empire and in the aftermath era? Is another bigger question though. What kind of reveals is this panel going to have at all? Are they waiting for, I don't know, maybe New York Comic Con, maybe uh something more stateside? I don't think be wild if they said, yeah, Old Republic, let's go. I think they're gonna wait on something that big for Celebration 2027 in Anaheim. Also fairly convinced it's gonna be in Anaheim in 2027.
Don't you mean 2026?
No, they're gonna skip a year.
Really? You don't think they're gonna do it for Mandalorian?
No, they're gonna skip a year. They're gonna do the Mandalorian. The big Mandalorian push will be D23. That'll be my guess. Because they do tend to skip a year. They skip. I mean, London was 2023.
Right.
Anaheim was 2022, but it was supposed to be 2020. So,
Oh, yeah, sure.
yeah, I think they're gonna skip a year. Make the big push at D23.
Oh well, then again,
2026.
2027 is the 50th anniversary.
Yes,
So
exactly. And it's the 10th anniversary of The Last Jedi. Let's do that, please.
that too.
Why not? But yeah, so they might, I think Dom was suggesting or was mentioning, that they could do something like they did in Chicago with Project Luminous, right? Just this little tease that then they fully reveal, maybe, hopefully, at Celebration Anaheim 2027. So there we go. Got a comment, Tom. Maybe we'll see. Keep it locked. Keep it locked to it. I know. Definitely, Dom, Chris Abbott, and Hannah are going. Those who I know, those folks who I know are going for sure. So definitely something. Keep it locked. Keep it. Yeah, locked here. And whatever we're able to see, whatever we're able to witness, with CouchCon, we'll definitely react to. Very likely Easter Monday we'll have a what was Star Wars Celebration, paper cannon on Star Wars Celebration, whatever happens, whatever news there.
Well, I'm still
Also
excited for Adam Christopher if he's coming back. I know for that for sure.
yeah, that'll be good. And I mean, even everything. I mean, not just paper cannon. Just we can do a whole reaction thing. What else at Celebration are you looking forward to?
Well, obviously, I'm looking forward to a bunch of stuff. I'm looking for the Mando panel and the
Yeah.
Ahsoka panel and all that. But the other big one that has my most curiosity in terms of because I don't know anything
Hmm.
is the 20th anniversary of Star Wars in animation. This
Yeah.
is separate, by the way, from Star Wars Visions, just so you know. And me
Hmm.
thinks that we'll finally know what our Bad Batch replacement show will be.
Yeah.
What the 3D Clone Wars style season of Star Wars animation will probably be, and maybe in a
Hmm.
few other things, perhaps. Who knows?
Hmm.
But because we don't have one yet, so
Yeah.
I'm excited for that and to see if there's an announcement for an upcoming animated show,
Yeah.
maybe this year.
So that's the Celebration stage at 3:30 local. Dave Filoni and Athena Portillo. So, Mr. Dave. Yeah. So we'll see. Uh, I'm wondering how much this will be made public. I hope so.
Hey, as long as there's
Mm,
just an announcement saying, "Hey, this is what the next anime show is," I'm happy about that.
well, what I'm saying, I'm wondering if they will. Hopefully, they'll live stream some things because I know, like, trying to remember. It feels like London didn't have that many live streams, or did it have a lot of live stream panels?
I don't know. I don't. Maybe I feel like the publishing stuff did.
Yeah,
I don't
I
think
think.
like the
Yeah,
big one did with like the announcement of like the Ray
yeah.
and Filoni and Mangled movie. I don't think that one did.
Yeah. So this publishing one might. I mean, I know the High Republic. I remember watching the High Republic one. Of course, they cut it off, and then the Vernestra. Then Leslie comes out, and all that. The Vernestra. Woo. Um, that yeah. Happens, which fair enough. But uh, yeah, I guess this publishing panel might have a bit of a shot at being live stream. We know they're going to do the usual Star Wars Live. Whoever's going to be uh hosting the YouTube thing. I've never
The
been. I
complicated thing
will.
though will be it'll be Japan time, and it's like we're
Yeah,
American.
yeah. So, I mean, you're American,
Oh,
Eastern
we're
time
in the
too,
North American.
Pacific, North America. Yeah. So that's another thing is I will not be watching this live. I'll be busy with church stuff and work stuff, but it's also partly why I'm not going because I'm busy. I have sold my ticket.
Hooray!
I just need to figure out transfer my ticket, but that's a whole other deal. But yeah, it's coming up. It's in a month, in just over a month tomorrow. So here we go. Nice. Any last thoughts before we move on?
Nope. It feels like the calm before the storm of
There we go.
celebration. It's kind of exciting.
The calm before the con is how I
Yes.
call it. The calm before the con. This great gathering of Star Wars fandom, both in person and online, for better. Hopefully for better. Hopefully for better.
Like everyone
'Cause
washes their hands.
yes, because yes, wash your hands, take a shower.
Or get
Hopefully for
deodorant.
better. Because fandom. It's an interesting thing. Uh, keep venting.
Yeah, fandom. Uh,
Yeah.
we got my theology times banner ready to go, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So first off, before we get into the discussion, I want to just make this little disclaimer.
Mhm.
Disclaimer to our guests and disclaimer to anybody listening. We are very open about who is in fandom. We don't want to exclude anybody.
Mhm.
As far as I'm concerned, if you like Star Wars in any shape, size, or form, you're a Star Wars fan.
Yes.
Make that clear. Because we might, I know, especially when two white guys talk about who is and who's not fandom, normally doesn't turn out well for anybody.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
That's true.
So I just want to make that clear right now as we kind of go into our observation. And if we sound gatekeepy, we really don't mean to. We hope we don't. It's just like observations and deep thoughts.
Yes.
Okay. Disclaimer over. So that being said, that always ominous. Fandom's an interesting thing because it's like, what does it mean to be a fan? When you call yourself that, what does that mean?
Mhm.
It's a very amorphous thing, and I think that in a lot of ways, we do kind of have to admit to ourselves to a certain extent there is some level of fandom that you individuals will have,
Mhm.
and that can definitely impact conversations, whatnot. So, like, if I meet somebody and they say, "Hey, I like Star Wars," I'm like, "Oh, awesome!" Like, "Yeah, I know episode 4, 5, and 6, and haven't seen anything else." That's kind of going to limit our conversation of what we can talk about with Star Wars eventually. Compared to you and me, Matthew, like, because we
Mhm.
read it all, we watch it all, or we try to. We can have these sort of deeper thoughts and conversations and do this podcast on a weekly basis.
Mhm.
Um,
True.
so there's that. You know, there's definitely a difference between someone who watches the movie and someone who's willing to go to Japan and buy a
Mhm.
ticket and travel.
Sorry.
Oh, bless you. Oh, shoot. Shoot. Going down. Going down.
I'm alive. I'm alive. I tried to mute myself before I sneezed into the ether. Sorry.
Yes,
Go ahead.
that's okay. So there are those different levels as well, and it's kind of the question
Yeah.
of, does anything unify us other than our, I guess, our amorphous love of something we call Star Wars.
Mhm.
Um, so those are kind of my opening thoughts about fandom before we get deeper into it. But Matthew, what are
Yeah.
your opening thoughts about fandom? Anything I've just said?
Well, even connected to that disclaimer, right? It's tricky to talk about because we don't want to discourage people,
Hmm.
right? We want to say, yeah, if you love it. Yeah, it's just to say, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Anybody can get onto YouTube and say, I'm going to talk about Star Wars. Anyone can do that. They're free to do that. It's how the internet works, more or less.
Hmm.
Um, I don't have to listen. Nobody's making me listen to someone who, like, I started watching at one point. I started watching, listening to, not watching, back when podcasts were audio only. Started listening to a podcast, 2015, and he was like, "Yeah, well, I haven't seen all of Clone Wars, but I mean to." And it's a Star Wars podcast. Someone who by 2015 hadn't seen all of Clone Wars.
Hmm.
Like, I don't think he's gonna miss some things. He's gonna miss some things. Now, I fully admit I haven't read all of Star Wars canon. I have a paper canon. I haven't read the Alphabet Squadron trilogy. Which is
Sure.
bad, but it's not. I have read the Aftermath trilogy, and I've read everything. So that's the thing is those there is different levels of how much time you've invested in engaging with the material or not, and that's going to inform your perspectives and opinions or not. um
I
and
also
so
I also would say what you want to focus on as well,
mhm,
because, like, if I was do a podcast and I was as I was advertising myself as a catch-all podcaster,
mhm,
if I haven't seen Clone Wars yet, that's one thing. But if I'm catching myself like, hey, I know all about Star Wars. Yeah, I haven't watched that. Then it kind of false advertising. Whereas
yeah,
I'm like, this podcast is dedicated to Star Wars as film and the history of film and how
mhm,
film is made.
yeah,
Then that's more forgivable in terms of, like, you're focusing on the films, and it's like maybe you're just focusing on the original six or whatnot. So you're kind of doing
sure,
the historiography of filmmaking and art. So that's a
yeah,
different. That'd be like different between like us, where we're calling ourselves Ion Canon. We're talking about everything canon.
mm,
And if you've only just seen six things, that's not really we can't really milk that for all it's worth.
yeah.
But
So now that's another thing is your run of your podcast is going to be shorter.
that too.
But that to be said, I mean, yeah. That being said, I do have this thing of, if you say something, if Andor season one, if Andor season two, if you've caught up, if you watched Andor season one, if it takes you until June, if by June if you watch the first episode of Andor, the first three episodes of Andor season two, you're still caught up. I count by a month or two to being still caught up. So that's another thing. But that's again this sort of weird arbitrary thing. Then there's the folks who are all, yes, April 22nd at 9 p.m. Eastern, my butt's gonna be in front of my TV watching this thing.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's just it's more of an objective difference, I guess, of
Well,
what
also,
we
you don't
assume.
also want to be like people
Mhm.
got lives and whatnot. So it's like,
Yeah.
like they want to,
Also,
and then
it's
it's like, oh, life gets in
yeah.
the way.
I
No,
haven't
go ahead.
seen all of Young Jedi Adventures, for
Not
example.
true.
So
So
there's
there's
that.
that.
There's also the age things,
Hmm.
but also to say, my nieces, they've only my one niece, she's only seen Young Jedi Adventures, and maybe an episode of the Clone Wars because that's all she can do. Is this that make her less of a Star Wars fan? Not at all. So there's
No,
that. Yeah,
yeah, I think we don't want to make anybody feel lesser for.
sure,
Um, I just think it's like y- it depends on like how you are presenting yourself as well. As I think
true.
can also be a factor. And like if I came to you, imagine like
Yeah,
I am the ultimate Star Wars fan. I know everything. I've only seen like the original trilogy. Um,
yeah,
I'm not a fan. I just can't. I just am presenting myself
yeah,
almost incorrectly or very falsely.
yeah.
Um, now, and this is where fandom and religion come into play. Where's my theology? There it is. I,
First
you know,
time for everything.
yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
I'm coming into this. So this is where I think this is the one thing where fandom and religion kind of get very interesting,
Hmm.
right? Because you know, on the one hand, what does it mean to be a religious person or a good insert your religion here, Christian, Muslim, Jewish,
Hmm.
Buddhist, whatever, right? There are people like me, Matthew. You study the Bible, you do church things. You probably know more. You probably can name the verses and the whatnots off the top of your head. I mean, maybe you can. I don't know. Whereas other people are like, yeah, I believe in God, be it the Christian one or the Muslim or Jewish or
Hmm.
Buddhist ones, and they probably have never read a single text of the holy books ever. Right? But they say, I believe in Jesus. Never read the Bible in life. Um,
You'd be surprised. Sorry.
no, I'm sure there are people out there. Now, the difference
Yeah,
between that and Star Wars is you kind of have to watch at least a little bit of Star Wars to
yeah.
kind of claim that. Like, I think it'd be weird to say, I'm a Star Wars fan. Well, actually, here's the thing. I think you can, but like, if you like engage with Star Wars only through fan fiction, but never read anything official.
There's an analogy for you. I like that. I'm going to use that.
I mean, to be fair, I have done that. There have been things that I have
Yeah.
only engaged through fan fiction and never the actual material. So there's that, and that gets into
Hmm.
a whole other thing later. But
Yeah.
um, you know, with Star Wars, like there are people who just they watch the movies and they enjoy it, and they're a Star Wars fan, and we welcome them, and we want to be polite to them. But it's still the difference between like you and me, who we read the dang the visual guide, and we know that Palpatine wears only size 6 shoes and has a wart on his third toe and stuff like that. I don't think that's actually a thing, but that's my
Okay.
analogy.
Yeah, I get where you're getting at. But
And kind of like religion, where it's like there are the religious who go to church every Sunday and listen to the preacher, and
Mhm.
are we listen to our podcast, and it makes me kind of worry, like, oh my god, are we the equivalent of Star Wars preachers? Is podcasting the equivalent of going to church? Um, I want the evangelical Star Wars podcast. I want the guy who's like, and the holy mortar spirits of the Son and the Daughter and the Holy Chosen One in the feast Louis the Emperor off the trench in peace. Force assassin transferred himself to Mexico. Hallelujah. Um,
That's funny.
I couldn't help myself. I wanted to do that.
You've been
But
waiting for 3 years to do that.
yes,
There we go.
I did it. I did it.
There you go. Good job.
You know,
It's funny.
and there is a difference.
Yeah.
I think in some way we have to acknowledge there is a difference, and then like the Bible, it's like, well, who are the true interpreters of the Star Wars,
Mhm.
right? Does the Pope have the only truest interpretation? I mean, if you're Catholic. By the way, happy St. Patrick's Day.
Oh yeah.
I'm actually Irish. I'm actually part Irish, so
There we
I'm
go.
Irish and Mexican, so both Catholic.
Nice.
I wasn't raised Catholic, but I didn't have my parents were. Um, so like,
Mhm.
did Papa, Frau Francis in the church have the truest divine right to say this is what this means in the Bible? And then other people can be like, well, no, in my interpretation, because I read it, and dang it. same with Star Wars. Like, who has the right to
Mhm.
say, what the true interpretation of Star Wars is? I mean, I guess George Lucas, but how far does that go? Is it just his own work? Is it the new work? Can he
Mhm.
retroactively come out and change what something means? Like, if tomorrow George Lucas just randomly came out into the news and just made a statement saying, yeah, Palpatine is Anakin's father. He made him through the midichlorians. That's all. And then just walks away. Do we have to interpret it that way? And
Mhm.
this gets into art just in general,
Yeah.
which is a whole other discussion. And that these are sort of the weird similarities between fandom and religion.
Mhm.
I don't know where to go from that. So Matthew, take it away. You
Yeah.
take time to go to reality challenge with Matthew now.
Yeah. Um, so what you bring up though is something that we've kind of forgotten in our modern world is, I mean, the word religion in the Middle Ages didn't mean anything separate from, it didn't mean just a metaphysical claim or religious belief. It meant specific actions, specific, involvement. It certainly meant, being, I mean, one of the uses even today means you're a monk or a nun, or you're religious in that sense, is actually a use of the term, and a very common use of the term, especially in the Roman Catholic world. um you uh yeah, an institute of religion, if you will. um what you're getting at is that it also really relies on membership in a community,
Mhm,
and a consistent membership in this, yeah, a community of folks in the real world, not just, yeah, we're connecting digitally, but we're part of this community in the real world. That, yes, Star Wars Celebration is a place we can gather, or online on podcasts, on
mhm,
at Toronto Comic Con, wherever, a real group of friends, group of people who've gathered around this central text.
mhm,
And this is where it really comes together is, um one of, you talk about teaching authority, and what, our podcasters, preachers, is George Lucas have the sole teaching authority of what Star Wars is. Even Roman Catholics will say that the Pope doesn't have sole teaching authority. What they would say is that, um that this community, this group of people, it, the interpretation, the official interpretation, it can't be me in my room thinking something up. It's never that. I'm never disconnected from what's come before me and everyone around me.
mhm.
And so what Roman Catholics will say is that the Pope is the one who gathers everyone together. So you could say Lucasfilm itself is the one that gathers everyone together.
That's kind of a scary
Um,
thought to give a corporation that much power.
yeah, it's, but it's Dave Filoni and them. But also to say, I mean, that's the interesting thing. A number of years ago, I went on, back when Stephen Kent had his, I guess his, oh, Beltway Banthas, I think it was called at the time, and just after the Last Jedi, and how YouTube was sort of like the printing press in the 16th century, and this new medium that enabled this great protest against a central interpretive authority. Um, and so, just like Luther was able to use this technology to launch this protest, this Protestant Reformation, similar idea, except that what Protestants now have discovered, I think what Star Wars fans have discovered, is there still needs to be bounds. There still needs to be a sense of limits. And the problem is, there's some folks on YouTube who have intentionally ejected themselves away from the limits. They are effectively heretics. Uh, Talking about a guy named, his Star Wars in the name is, he's very theoretical. Let's put it that way. That guy
That
kind of
guy.
separate himself out of the community. Um, Whereas the sense of, we have those bounds in order to say we are coming together to discuss and have legitimate disagreements and legitimate Star Wars opinions. And that's the thing I always say about, the Discord server or whatever. And you've been very strong on this, is genuine disagreements of Star Wars opinions are welcome and a good thing, just because we're looking at things in different perspectives, but we're coming together to talk and coming together to work through. And that's that kind of this real world engagement that we're talking about with each other around this, and the fact that we care enough to take the time to make that real world engagement is what makes us fans. and the fact that we care and the care itself. And so it's why it's like, okay, if you are a Star Wars fan, if you're gonna have a podcast, that's the thing, it's this added time, added education. The point, and I've always thought of this, the point of my theological education, I was hoping to get a job through it or whatever, and I kind of do. My day job, I use it. But the point is always to help other people interpret better. Those who don't have the time to study to get 2 graduate degrees in theology, right?
I would even
So also the last point I want to say then is the point of Iron Canon and Tractor Beam has always been to help folks engage these texts more meaningfully. So it's why we want to push towards commentary on themes and on character, including Tractor Beam. And this like 22-page comic book art thing that actually has a lot of depth to it. Chris and I try to push towards deeper questions about story and meaning, because we want to help people engage things better. And there's a virtue, we believe there's a virtue, a good in that. And so even if they don't have the time to engage as consistently as long, it's about serving the wider community. And if it's about saying, look at me and look what I can do, and that's the thing, people get into that and get into their heads, and that's where problems happen, where toxicity happens. That's where they start to eject themselves from the community for either their behavior or their content itself, or both. But yeah, if it's about helping people come together and think more deeply and feel more deeply and reflect more deeply, engage more deeply about this text that is all the Star Wars content that's come out, then we've done our work.
I wouldn't even argue that it's not about needing to know all the Star Wars content. It's just, what are you contributing? So, like, if you want to start a podcast that's just a New Hope centric because that's the only thing you've seen, but you want to really break down that movie and say, like, this is why it became such importance to cinema and the storytelling of just that individual movie, then, I think that's a positive contribution.
A limited run, that's all.
Or, I know our friends at Daughters of Ferrix haven't seen or read everything of everything. I mean, I think they're probably... I think that the joke has always kind of been Ellie knows more, and Sophie's sort of always the one who kind of hasn't watched all of it just yet. I don't think she's seen like all of Clone Wars or even like some of the Rebel stuff. I think she has seen Rebels. But their podcast is always about taking Star Wars ideas and trying to apply, and then like, okay, here's a little bit of an idea, but let's try to apply this to like some real world things, and really look in depth with like, let's take this little bit of Star Wars, but then it's like go really deep into like this real world idea about insert whatever the topic is at the time. So I think you brought up a good point. Like, it's not about really how much knowledge of Star Wars do I have. It's what knowledge of Star Wars do I have, but how am I contributing something positive, even if it's limited amount of knowledge.
That's true too.
So I think that's important. One thing I asked at the beginning of the podcast was, does anything unite us out of our love at Star Wars? Because much like religion, again, Star Wars got a lot of sex.
SECTS.
SEC sex.
It doesn't have the other thing.
Yeah, much like leftism. I would call it factions, but let's say sex, because that's
sects. Say factions.
Factions.
Just say factions.
Yeah, factions, right? Because we got a lot. Right, and I listed
Mhm.
a bunch of them here on the notes, and these aren't even like half of them I could think of. We got
Yeah.
Lucas purists, we got OT originalists, we got prequelists, we got sequelists, we got the Legends fans only. We like the
Mhm.
people who just like Andor. And even within those factions, we got factions within factions.
Yeah.
Lucas purists tend to be pretty unified. They're just fans of George Lucas. If anything, I think you could argue, not really that they like Star Wars. They just like George Lucas as an individual artist. Which, hey,
Yeah.
that's fine too. Like it's sort of like how, I'm excited for the Superman movie, but I'm more excited because it's James Gunn doing Superman. So I'm more excited for James Gunn as a person than Superman as a intellectual property. Um, so I like James Gunn movies.
Mhm.
OT originalist. They're divided between the ones who love Return of the Jedi and the ones who just barely tolerate it. Prequelists. Yes, there are divisions within the prequelist fandom. Funny enough,
Mhm.
there are those who just like the era but don't like the movie. Therefore, they just like the books and the comics and the Tartakovsky TV show. There are fans who like Clone Wars, but up to season 6, but they don't like season 7 because it's not George.
All right.
Um, no, I mean, there's actually some legit things. There are fans who don't like the Clone Wars 2008 show because they feel like the Filoni filter is a little too original trilogy
Hmm.
pleasing, and they feel like it's retroactively turning against
Interesting.
George's visions for the prequels and try to kind of it's giving in to the complaints and like it's not unfiltered George, which they like.
Hmm.
Sequelists. There are those who just like Force Awakens and don't like the other two. There are those who just like Last Jedi and don't like the Abrams films. There are those who just like the Abrams films, don't like Last Jedi. And
Mhm.
Legends fans. Oh, there are a bunch of factions in Legends fandom. They got people who just like the 90s stuff and then they stop after NGO. There are those who stopped liking it after the New Jedi Order, who just like the New Jedi Order. Um,
Mhm.
there are those who just like the Old Republic stuff. There are those who just like the Lucas era EU stuff. Um, and it is one of the most fascinating, and of course there are the High Republic fans.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. I haven't really done much of that. I don't. I mean, maybe after a while, when everyone looks back, then they'll start dividing between like Phase 2 was the only good phase. I liked Phase 1 and 2. It went downhill after 3. I'm sure that will happen.
Yeah.
It, I guarantee you that will happen. Um.
Maybe. I mean, Phase 3 is
Oh,
the best, but anyway.
I mean,
Well,
I already know some people don't like Phase 3, so
Phase 2 is the best. Sorry, Phase 2 is the best. Anyway.
oh yeah, I love Phase 2. But sure. I mean, I'm sure there will be. All right, so it's interesting. Much like religion, every time a Star Wars thing happens, like we tend to divide into even these smaller little mini groups as
Mhm.
well with our own little obsessions. They go Thrawn fandom. There we go. Just people who just love Thrawn and all of Tim Zahn's work, and
Mhm.
they kind of chunk it to the sides. Like this is my Star Wars, right? It's just these
Yeah.
all of Tim Zahn stuff. Um, and then there's like X-wing fans and stuff like that, and kind of little
There's book
pockets.
only fans,
Oh yeah, book only
fans
fans.
of only the books,
Yeah,
Star Wars
haha.
sects, fans of only the books. Come on,
Oh, we're
Matthew.
so in trouble. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, yeah,
Exactly.
there are those people too. There are people who just watch
Mhm.
the movie. I mean, animation fans.
Yeah.
Star Wars Rebels fans only. Um,
Mhm.
um, it's interesting. I mean, I guess that speaks just to the dearth of Star
Yeah.
Wars and how everybody can kind of find their own little pockets of what you like, which is
Yeah.
valid. Hey, as long as you're not hurting anybody, like if that's your little hyper fixation, go ahead. I'm all for it. Um,
Mhm.
I think that's one of the reasons why I think Star Wars in the Disney era has sort of succeeded instead of kind of putting all their eggs in kind of one super basket. It's sort of like, Mandalorian appeals to this kind of people, High Republic appeals to this kind of people, Andor appeals to this kind of people, Ahsoka, kind of appeals to this kind of people. So it's like, I feel like in some ways they
Yeah.
know, like, you can't unite us all. We're never going to be happy. So, like, just make certain things that will appeal to certain people and just kind of randomize it every now and then. Um,
Mhm.
so, you know, this isn't just a Star Wars thing. Star
No.
Trek fans got have it. Lord of the Rings fans kind of have it. The divisions are different. Depending on how big the thing is. Doctor Who fans have it. There are people just like this Doctor, and then or this writer, and then they're done. Um,
Mhm.
So, I think that just speaks to the gigantic nature of our fandom. We are not a monolith. We never will be. Um, I'm sure I mean, you deal with this in religion. They're
Yeah.
not Christianity's not united. Hasn't been for the
What?
last couple thousand years.
What?
Uh,
Yeah.
there were wars fought about it. Hopefully, we haven't
Mhm.
have any actual wars fought over Star Wars. That'd be just sad. Outside of online wars,
Yeah. Online Twitter wars.
online
Yeah.
Twitter wars. At least no one died.
Now that hopefully no blue sky wars. Blue sky
Yeah,
is a nice, fun place for now.
yeah.
Keep it that way.
Um,
Yeah.
but I'm sure Matthew want to contribute to this part. I'm sure this is
So
something you see.
you just took us through a whirlwind of just different
Factions.
stuff,
I know.
different things people like. It strikes me there's a huge I think there's a huge difference between, say, I'm a prequelist because I mean it's my favorite thing, my favorite era, favorite design era.
Mhm,
Revenge of the Sith is my favorite film,
mhm,
but I'm gonna enjoy everything. Uh, I mean, part of the thing with the prequelist history, for example, is part of the wave of saying liking it before it was cool, remembering the times it was completely beat down on, being part of that, being like, ooh, prequels, blah, and then having a conversion, speaking of religion. Um,
mhm.
so that being part of that history, and so that lends it to this impetus, but then saying, well, of course I'm going to watch Andor. I'm going to love Andor. I'm going to read, that's the thing. Or to saying, I have a comics podcast because I love comics. But even on the comics podcast, Chris and I were going to talk about Andor because we want to, because it's fascinating, compelling Star Wars.
Mhm.
So there's a difference between saying this is just my favorite thing, but I like everything else as well, and this is the only thing I like and care about. And I'm certain that there's far vast majority are in that first group, in that first camp. It's folks on these forums and on these apps that are well, I think about the apps, for example. I think what's fascinating, what we saw with High Republic fandom is there became, I mean, this is brilliant. I love this. We're just whole accounts dedicated to one character and kind of impersonating one character. Like there's, I don't know, like an like an Avar Chris, like at Avar Chris, and just this person would just post Avar stuff and whatnot, and just I mean, talking about shipping and talking about fanfic and all that, but also just reactions to the real stories, the official stories that came out,
Mhm.
um, and speculation, things like that. I love that this whole pocket of High Republic Twitter that existed. I don't think it exists anymore because they've probably all migrated to Blue Sky. Um, but but I'm guessing they also are good with the sequel trilogy, the sequel era. Um, it's just the things they want to devote more. I mean, this maybe brings up what we were saying before. They want to devote more time and energy and attention to. You know, I will I will buy a High Republic book day one, and I'll try and finish it as soon as I can. Um, but I mean, so Glass Abyss, I do have it. There's another copy right there. I haven't actually read it yet. I mean, again, I'm a prequelist, but there's other things I've been reading first, and I haven't read Rise of the Red Blade yet. Um, so
Oh yeah.
things I have it, and I'm gonna read it, I promise. But so that's the thing is there's only 7 days in a week. There's only 24 hours in a day.
Mhm,
So it's what do you do? We're also have day jobs, and we're also doing other things, right?
mhm,
It's what are we gathering? What panels are we pitching to cons? What cosplay meetups? I mean, cosplay was a whole world, right? And what what cosplay are you gonna put your time into? So, but that's the thing, and that's the thing that uh got really problematic. Like I said, is like we were saying, the problem with putting bounds, and this is why we're so reticent and hesitant to say putting boundaries and saying is there such thing as a truer or lesser Star Wars fan, or is there such thing as a maybe someone whose Star Wars opinion is more reliable than another, more informed by the story, content itself, etc. Um, but where we really got into problems is even both with the prequels and the sequels is to say when you said um, you know so the Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker, that's Star Wars, but The Last Jedi isn't. And you can't be a real Star Wars fan. I'm stating the obvious here, but saying people who excommunicated each other, right? You can't be a real Star Wars fan if you like The Last Jedi. Um, you know, whereas I would never say someone who likes Force Awakens or Rise of Skywalker is a fake Star Wars fan. It's just, and there are things about those films I like. But there's that whole, I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing about using the word heretic and bringing that religion word in, which it's a very weird word. We don't quite understand. It has all this weighted connotation. A heretic is someone who separates themselves from the community by trying to separate others from the community. Is the one who says, I'm the one who has all the truth, and it's only this very small, narrow bit, so I'm going to chuck myself away. Whereas to say, this is the thing I want to emphasize, this is why I want to emphasize it. And if someone else wants to emphasize it, maybe they have a good reason, maybe I disagree with that reason, but we can at least recognize something in common, and that mutual recognition across difference, that's what makes for unity amidst difference. And so I mean, I say the word prequelist, I call you a sequelist, I'm like, yeah, come on to Tractor Beam to talk about Kylo Ren, because you're gonna have a good perspective on it. It's, is it all or nothing, or is it a both and that's the thing, is healthy communities are able to foster both ands more than all or nothings. I mean, have very, and then the rest is both and, right? Unity in essentials, diversity in non-essentials.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people who are focused on their particular niche of fandom, more or less, are probably positive about everything else. Just like, yeah, I want to just dedicate my time to High Republic stuff, or this movie, or Mon Mothma, or Thrawn. Like, I'm sure there's that. But I will say it also is interesting of sort of like, not in the terms of like, like, oh, you can't be a true Star Wars fan, but more like, why is it for you personally? It's like, I like this, but this is where it stops. It's sort of like the prequel fans who don't like the 2008 Clone Wars. So it's like, I mean, I'm sure I've seen their reasoning. It's not actually that illogical.
They don't like it or don't consider it Star Wars.
They just don't like it.
Okay, so that that's okay. Whatever, that's their opinion. I mean, it's like your opinion, man.
I know, but I think it's an interesting one. They're like, it's like it's the same era. It's George Lucas. So like, what is this different? Now, to be fair, I understand like some stuff of it. Like I get people who like really like the 2002, not 2002, 2003 2D Clone Wars by Tartakovsky. Maybe not liking the 3D one, because I really like Tartakovsky too, and there's such different styles. So it's maybe like just a preference thing of like you like Tartakovsky style. I mean, I do too. I mean, he's great. He's one of the best animators of all time. So there's that. There's that for you. Or even like how Timothy Zahn writes Thrawn versus how Dave writes Thrawn. I see that there's definitely that division there too. It's like I understand, like maybe I prefer that one. I mean, if you want to headcanon yourself, like to me, this is I like I mean, here's the interesting thing, like my Star Wars, right? Like where
what a phrase.
It's a phrase. I mean, it's like, but to me, like I mean, there's still older people. Like to me, their Star Wars is Episode 4, 5, and a little bit of 6.
Nope. And it's called Star Wars. It's not called The New Hope.
I do. They were there. They were there in 1977. And then that's just where it begins and where it stops. Maybe they're not, as long as they're not like jackasses to anybody else. It's like
Yeah.
that's my Star Wars. That's to
Sure.
me where I can't do it.
Hmm.
Nothing you will say will kind of convince me I to think of these movies as good or Star Wars, right? Just nope,
Hmm.
whatever. Um,
Yeah. I mean, maybe a way into this. This is Matt
Sure.
Moore brings up this good question. By the way, as far as splash page doing the forces work, uh, is it a religion or a series of disparate cults? I mean, the difference
I
there,
hope
I
we're not a
think.
cult.
Well, so the difference there is how do we mediate and navigate difference? That's the distinction I think between a healthy religious community and a cult. And a cult is one that uh, admits of no difference and no distinctions and says you will be uniform or else. And that's why then they separate off and say we're going to be our uniform little group over here and a uniform little group over there. Whereas a healthy religious community or a healthy any community can actually come together and talk and dialogue and say, well, this perspective, this set of perspectives, this set of interests here, set of interests there, um, but we can also come together and have different ideas and perspectives and to say, I'm like, when will I was kept on being like, when will Hasbro, for example, uh start to pay attention to the prequel trilogy? Is that partly why the Rancor failed? The Rancor HasLab failed. That's kind of one of my little examples here. And people might disagree and say, no, the original trilogy stuff will always sell better. That's an example there. Um, can I have that discussion, or am I going to say no? Screw that guy. you know, whatnot. So that's I think that kind of gets at really the difference between, again, religion in a healthy sense of you have a common uh a, something in common to recognize each other in common, but there is a room for disagreement and difference and diversity. That's the way I positively understand religion, right? A healthy community versus a cult, right? Of course, cult, even then, it's tricky because the word cult, students of religion, scholars of religion, um, do see, do kind of blur the difference. They say maybe a new religious movement, and that there are healthy new religious movements, and then there are toxic new religious movements. And so maybe the extent to which we're healthy is when we can have difference, and the extent to which we're toxic is the extent to which we can't. Um, and so that's the thing is with the guy who's very theoretical.
Mhm.
Let's say that he doesn't have any room for anyone who says, I'm a woman, I'm a person of color, I'm queer, and I want more representation. He chucks them out, so therefore he checks himself out. Because that's where Star Wars is going, is saying more representation, more stories. Uh, Straight white dudes also get our stories too. It's just more among many. So great question, Matt. I don't know, Joel, if you have any kind of response.
Well, I don't know
Or,
about you, but I'm the high priest of Star Wars, and I declare all things of my word. I'm just kidding.
okay.
I'm just
Well,
kidding.
that's the joke, right?
Right,
You're on
right.
YouTube. Yeah, there we go.
Oh,
So
we got some interesting questions here. I want to
yeah.
see. What's your favorite Star Wars movie? I have two. Can't choose between Revenge of the Sith and Return of the Jedi. Oh, good choices.
Mhm.
Me, Return of the Jedi. I mean, you always said Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
So, and favorite Sith and favorite Jedi,
Yeah.
Palpatine and Qui Gon. There we go.
Yeah. That's good. I mean, Vader and Anakin. I don't know. I don't know if that's true. But that's the thing, is that's the fun thing. We can have different answers to these questions and we can talk about them. We can debate them,
Mhm.
but we're debating them in a common, here's the stupid word, discourse. But it's a useful term because it means we're having discourse, we're engaging each other. Um, so there you go. Yeah, what is my actual favorite Sith? Um, that's a good question. We haven't had enough in canon, I don't think.
Well, we got
I mean,
Palpatine, Vader, Dooku, Maul, the Stranger,
yeah, Plagueis for a second. Um,
Plagueis. If you read the book,
yeah, there's There's one in Echoes of Fear. There's a really cool one.
Well,
Like
here's the
flashbacks. Jedi, yeah, Qui-Gon is actually probably the right answer.
well, here's an interesting thought, kind
Yeah,
of in terms trying to go back to our original thought about your
yeah,
knowledge.
hmm
That question, who's your favorite Sith Lord
yeah,
and Jedi, too, both. You know, that question can have very different answer depending on how much Star Wars you know. If you know
yeah.
Star Wars Legends, you got a bunch of Sith to choose from. You got
True.
Execution, you got Bane, you got all the Sith of the Old Republic. I mean,
Mhm.
here's something to think about, Matthew. Here's your big blind spot. If
Yeah,
call you out a little bit. Just kidding, just kidding.
fair enough.
You were talking about how you were watching a podcast, but you didn't want to really listen because you said you didn't watch the Clone Wars.
Right.
Yeah, you mean your Star Wars Legends knowledge is a little it's got some blind spots
Yeah.
here and there.
Oh, not
Um,
here and there. It's extensive.
it's extensive, and Legends, Star Wars. What became Star Wars Legends? Could be just the expanded universe.
hmm
That was going on for 30, 40 years.
Yeah,
And it created a whole ecosystem. I mean, that's why they're a whole division of Star Wars fans. To them, Star Wars is more that expanded universe than even the original 6 films.
yeah,
To them, the Star Wars is the adventures of Jaina and Jason Solo. Dang it, until he died and Jaina buried Jagged fell and the whole thing.
yeah,
Um, so there's something there just to think about in terms
hmm
of
yeah,
the depths of Star
mm-hmm.
Wars.
hmm
Um,
yeah. I mean, I've read 2 of the 3 Bane books by Edmund Teller's Drew Karpyshyn.
Okay, well there
Yeah,
you go. But that there's
I've
something
definitely read Darth Plagueis
there's
and
something
Lost
to think.
Stars. Not Lost Stars. Well, read Lost Stars too, but Dark Times.
Okay, so there you go. But yeah,
Mm,
there's something that to think about.
Yeah.
I said that there were only fans of Andor. Oh, that sounds like wrong tell. Ah ha ha.
Sure.
It's funny because I actually kind of get that
Yeah.
mentality to a little bit, not in terms of like everything else isn't Star Wars, but just I like this one particular thing. I just can't care for the rest.
hmm
Well, I'm not definitely in this extreme when it comes to this other franchise, but I really kind of just like Deep Space Nine out of all the
Yeah.
tracks. I mean, I like other things about Star Trek for sure, but like, yeah, I'm definitely a Deep Space Nine fan. I love
Yeah.
Deep Space Nine. I can talk about Deep Space Nine for hours. Um, now to be fair to the difference between Deep Space Nine and Andor is at least Deep Space Nine has 7 seasons and like 100 something episodes, and
True.
Andor's only going to have 20. So
hmm
the unfortunate thing about modern television is like, yeah, too bad you only like 20 different things. Or at least with Deep Space Nine, I get
True.
like a whole freaking 100 episodes and a whole universe to enjoy.
hmm
Um,
I mean, it's interesting parallel though because DS9 was the most serious,
that
um,
too.
most almost closest thing Star Trek got to prestige TV. It really, I mean, it was it was probably the first North American show to have a 3 episode arc. So to predate everything that TV would do in the next decade.
Oh yeah.
It's an interesting parallel there. I mean, that's I do get folks who aren't that into Star Wars, but they'll watch Andor because it is the closest thing. It is the prestige show because they're into political dramas and into uh kind of procedurals and things like that. I mean, this gets at a whole other category. We have the casual fan who, you know, has seen maybe saw the original trilogy when they were kids
Hmm.
and has seen the prequels once and seen the sequels once and doesn't have the time or energy to watch Clone Wars, Rebels, or any of the animated shows. Definitely not Resistance. But they'll maybe. I mean, will they watch? Yeah, they'll probably watch Rogue One. Um, and then would they even watch the Mandover shows? Maybe not, but they'll watch Andor because it's the most real
I would
world
say
show,
season.
right?
I think I remember season 1 and 2 of Mandalorian being big hits.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
There's a reason why
Um,
Grogu was everywhere.
it's true. He was everywhere. That's
He
true.
hit the
It did
zeitgeist.
it did penetrate beyond
Hmm.
uh the fandom, if you will. So that's true too. There's that. I do want to go back to your point about legends though. And the
Okay.
thing is Uh, yeah, I mean, folks who devoted lots of time to yeah, to these books when they came out, when they were teenagers or younger, especially. And so I'm going to say something slightly incendiary here. Here's my incendiary take. The ability to navigate difference is a principal mark of maturity. The
Oh, yeah.
ability to sit across from someone and say, "You've experienced life differently than me. You see things differently than me," and to sit curiously listen and seek to understand. And it is a skill that I think our apps and our uh, just especially our apps, but just our species, we've never fully. It's always so rare. It's never been something we've excelled at as a species. But I think
That's true.
even this medium here and these media here have made it even worse. And so you if someone says, I mean, this is what we saw in 1999 to 2005 is, you know, Star Wars, the original trilogy was my comfort blanket as a kid, and I wanted to return to my comfort blanket, and George Lucas isn't giving me my comfort blanket. He's giving me something different and something that I didn't expect. And so I hate it. Goodbye. As opposed to okay, George Lucas is giving me something weird and different.
Or I just
Maybe
didn't think the movie was that good. I thought there were plot problems. I thought that maybe
well,
the
that's just it too.
pacing
Is
could have been nicer.
the original trilogy has its problems too, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Hate to break it to you, except for Empire Strikes Back, it is actually perfect. But um, you know, uh, same thing with the Last Jedi, right? J.J. Abrams gives me my comfort blanket. Ryan Johnson rips it away from me. Now, that's the thing is for me to sit across from someone to express that, it's up to me then to listen and understand why people felt so strongly against the Last Jedi. I think I take that responsibility with a lot of weight as someone who I'd like to think does a good job of listening to people with different perspectives. But that's also why I love the Last Jedi, because it confronts our perspectives. The Acolyte, episode 3,
But
is the
also depends on.
so
I also think it depends on what the critique actually is, right? Like
exactly.
you love Revenge of the Sith, and I mean I do too. So
So
but
let me clarify my point. Is
Mhm.
um, it's the difference between saying I can appreciate this or I respect that other people will like it versus this offends me and I'm not going to engage with it or people who like it. You know what I mean? That's the
Right.
difference. And
I will say
you know,
though, just to kind of play a little devil's advocate, it depends on how it offends you, right? So like
that's part of it.
I would think that like here's a great example. I'm gonna use Revenge of the Sith.
Mhm.
And I like Revenge of the Sith, so I'm so like
Yeah.
if
I think I know where you're going with this.
if you like if Revenge of the Sith offends you because like that Darth Vader shouts no, it's like that's not how I imagined Darth Vader gonna sound. This movie offends me on a nerdy level. I've had my headcanon for 30 years about what the battle between Obi-Wan and Anakin, blah blah blah. No,
Yeah.
yeah, whatever. Shut up. But if I were to say this movie offends me because I feel like Padme was very mistreated in the script,
Yeah.
and they didn't know what to do with her, and she's just been reduced to a character who is just sad and dies and is pregnant. No, I could totally see someone being offended by that.
Yeah.
I think you're female Star Wars fan who really invested a lot in Padme and looked up to her, and then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you're now been reduced to just you cry, you're pregnant, you die. I'm so sorry if I'm not offending anybody with saying that. I love Padme too. So if that is your kind of if that's the place you're coming from,
Hmm.
okay, way more valid. Way more
Yeah.
valid to say that, and okay, I'm not gonna say anything. Sort of like how Last Jedi. I do know a lot of our friends who feel Finn was mistreated
Yeah.
in that film. Um, I don't agree with that personally, but I thought pretty much read quite well. But you know what? I am not gonna necessarily say, "Oh, you're wrong. Shut up."
Yeah.
But I think that is a genuine place to come at it if you feel that way, and that is valid. A feeling
Yeah.
to have.
I mean, even Luke in the Last
Mhm,
Jedi, right? I mean, this is what I'm getting at. Like, if you went into it and you had this idea of Luke as this myth, this legend. Dom has talked about this a few times, right?
mhm,
This myth, this legend, and you see him reduced to this crumpled old man, and your reaction to that is, ew, I don't like this. This is not what I was hoping for.
mhm,
Uh, then okay. It's one thing to say that, and yet, all right, well, if someone else does is fascinated by that and does appreciate that, well, then fair enough. It's one thing to say that, and one thing for me to say, uh, what you don't like The Last Jedi? You don't accept that Luke is I think first of all, thanks for the super chat, Skyrim clips. Very much appreciated. Appreciate the perspective. Yeah, you got some great questions in there. There you go. Thank you. Uh there we go. See, if you super chat us, we'll get you immediately.
yeah,
Yeah. It's one thing for me to say, what, you don't like The Last Jedi? You're not engaging the material enough.
yeah,
And that's not fair for me to say that, right? If you are engaging with the material and with your own reaction to it in a way that is honest, in a way that is curious, that is a mature way of navigating difference, and curious maybe of what other people think and experience. That's a mature way of navigating difference. But
mhm,
those who say, even with Luke, oh, he has to uh, come out in front of the First Order with a laser sword and kick some tar, or else I can't engage with anybody who likes this film,
mhm,
and I can't engage with this film at all. Uh, then they're the ones again separating themselves out from the conversation. Maybe this is a way of putting it. Religious communities, fandom communities, at their best, they're conversations about what these things mean, what our lives mean. I
mhm,
mean, we're talking about Star Wars, not as much, but still, uh, it is. George Lucas was the Campbellian, channeling the Campbellian work of making meaning through this story and exploring meaning through the story. And I mean, that's the thing. Self curiosity is always such an important aspect of this, and so that's what I mean in terms of maturity versus immaturity, right? And self awareness and self curiosity as an essential bedrock of maturity that enables us to be part of and work and live alongside people who are different from us. And that's the thing. Star Wars fans at our best were able to do that. And again, 48 years of all this content.
mhm.
We got to be able to do it.
You were talking about the casual audience for a
Mhm.
bit, and I
Yeah.
do wonder if, much like culture itself, the
Mhm.
casual audience sort of changes. What does that mean?
Yeah.
To some extent, right? Okay, like I think some things will always be you kind of need to be deeper in the weeds to know that
Mhm.
this exists. Like I don't think there will ever come a time when the casual audience also means they knew about the Ewoks cartoons in the in
Right.
the in the 80s. Although I did meet a couple people who grew up in the 80s who said those movies and shows were actually pretty big for its time. So in some ways that might, I mean, maybe that's changed where it's like maybe that's
Mhm.
sort of the opposite where it's like in the 80s, yeah, the
Mhm.
Ewoks cartoon and the Ewoks movies were something that casual people knew about, and then that just because they probably weren't that good or just they didn't hold up. It's like now people
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, I forgot about those. So it's sort of like what became casual is no longer casual. It's like actually quite niche for younger
Yeah.
people. So it's almost got lost to history.
Mhm.
Where I do think I think the casual audience today knows at least 6 of these films and my guess, probably 9. I'm gonna say that they at least
Yeah.
know that the saga exists to some extent. But does the casual audience also know that there was an Obi-Wan series that took place in between 3 and 4? I don't know. Like, maybe they do now, but will they know in 30 years? Will that be something that casual
Mhm.
audience members know? Will The Mandalorian be something that the casual audience still remembers? I don't know. Will Andor? I don't know. I mean, that's one of the things where we're kind of just having to guess about time. But,
Yeah.
I do think that the casual audience,
Mhm.
what the casual audience mean, what is known by the casual audience will shift and change over time. Actually, I talked to
Yeah.
Dominic about this. We were talking about like some of the differences between Force Awakens and just kind of the evolution of the sequel trilogy, and how like one of the more interesting aspects of the development, and kind of you can see the kind of also kind of the re-evaluation of the prequels to a certain extent
Mhm.
is the term cis, where in Force
Yeah.
Awakens, that term, the word cis gets mentioned once. In Last Jedi, I don't know if the word cis gets mentioned in Last Jedi. I know Star Cities gets mentioned once,
Mhm.
but then when you get to 2019, and that's kind of when the prequel looking at, uh, kind of really kicking the high gear because of Last Jedi,
Mhm.
but better and for worse. I mean, what I mean by better and for worse, I mean like I sometimes feel like a lot of those haters just like, oh, we're done with the prequels. Now we got something else to be on.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
it was a mix of positive and negative things kind of coming together. Um, but look at Rise of Skywalker. Word cis is everywhere.
Yeah.
It's the planet of the Sith, the Sith Eternal. May you strike me down and clench your silver feather, Sith. And because
I
I
am all
think
the Sith.
I am all the Sith, right? And I think because
Mhm.
that term Sith, which it's weird because Sith has been used if you're an EU fan, but
Mhm.
then but used in a mainstream big thing in the prequels. But by that time, the term Sith had become mainstream. Like people knew
Mhm.
what a Sith was, or at least they had
Yeah.
a general idea of like, oh yeah, they're the evil Jedi.
Yeah.
So, right? So
It's a good
what the
question.
casual audience knows, like, yeah, there's a great example. The casual audience does know the term Sith. They know what that means, or at
Mhm.
least they have a broad idea what that means. So, I think important
Yeah.
to look at as culture changes, what the
Yeah.
casual will know might change, and then what the deep in the weeds like us people might change.
Yeah. I mean, the word it helps that the word Sith shows up in a title of a movie. That
That too.
and the most universally beloved prequel. So, yeah, it's a good question. What folks? I think the Mandalorian again.
I mean,
If
I would say
anything,
Mandalorian probably the word people might know now more about.
yeah. I mean, like you were saying, I mean, I think it's going to stand the test of time in people's memory
Hmm.
for two reasons. They're going to call it the Baby Yoda show,
That too.
but also it's going to be um and anyone who the cares about the history of
Mhm.
television and different media and the relationship between film and television will know it's one of the shows that kicked off Disney Plus.
That too.
If folks who care about that kind of thing. I mean, I guess those still count as casual fans if they're not necessarily Star Wars specific fans, but they're like Disney media geeks, media nerds in a good
That
way. Um, but yeah, it's a good question. What people are going to remember. I mean, what I'm curious about, say for example, is folks who are just watching the Mandoverse
Mhm.
and uh, like folks who've just seen the 11 films, Rogue One and Solo, and are watching the Mandoverse and they come across Ahsoka.
Mhm.
Um, thankfully, say my parents have me to ask about Rebels
Mhm.
and Clone Wars. Do folks? I mean, I guess this was part of the idea. Is okay. You're curious about uh, what uh Hu Yang was talking to Jason about this Kanan character.
Mhm.
Go watch Rebels and everything with Ezra and Sabine there. Oh, you loved episode 5 and uh what this guy from how this guy from Revenge of the Sith relates to this main character Ahsoka Yeah, go watch Clone Wars. It's in these moments from the Clone Wars that are in live action.
Well, hopefully, I think that's kind of the point too, to
Yeah,
entice you to watch other stuff.
yeah. So it's kind of the idea, but I mean, getting people, giving people an awareness of those things. I mean, the thing is, when it comes to when it comes to the toxic fans who've separated themselves out of the conversation, yeah, there's a clearer line. When it comes to, maybe this is kind of the difficulty we're getting at the beginning. When it comes to folks who who like Star Wars, enjoy Star Wars, uh, but there's kind of this variation in varying degrees of time you can devote to it.
Mhm.
So, for example, my brother, he reads some novels. He's I like he's definitely gonna read Mask of Fear. I told him read Mask of Fear. That he's definitely seen everything on screen, including except for Resistance, maybe. Um, you know, I'd say he's more of a fan than most. It's just that he doesn't necessarily have the time or interest in starting a Star Wars podcast. He doesn't necessarily think about it. He thinks more about hockey and soccer. And so he does that, you know. Uh, but it's then there's folks who may be more casual and more, it's a more of a gradient than anything else with that. So yeah, it's a fascinating questions. Um,
Here's a
mhm,
interesting question. I kind of have thought about. I thought about
mhm,
just kind of a fun little thought experiment. If we put like Ash in her Mon Mothma cosplay,
mhm. Yeah.
and we then had got a person put him in Mandalorian armor, and they held
Mhm,
a sign. Ash just says, "Who am I?" And then the Mandalorian armor guy says, "What am I?" How many
mhm,
people are just walking across the street are gonna go, "Oh, that's a Mandalorian. I have no idea who you are, lady."
mhm.
Or like how many people are gonna recognize, "Oh, that's my Mothma," right? Like
Yeah.
how many, like that to me is like the sign of like a casual fan where it's like they'll see someone in the armor and
Mhm.
they're like, "Oh, that's a Mandalorian." They might go, "That's a Boba Fett."
Yeah.
But I'm just kind of because Boba Fett armor.
Yeah.
Boba Fett's still kind of even more still the big guy. But I'm just kind of curious. Like in
Yeah.
2025, do casual people just kind of know that's what a Mandalorian looks like? This is the way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, probably that. Although, I mean, that gets what we were getting at last week about the monosense
right.
Renaissance, um, Mon Mothma Renaissance. That folks who are gonna watch Andor, that she's gonna have such a prominent role in this season. She's possibly gonna be co-protagonist in this thing. That people are gonna be able to recognize her off the street because it's again, it's the prestige show that other folks are watching. She's the politician who tries to do her darndest and then recognizes, oh no, you gotta go burn it all down. Kind of like an older, I mean, yeah, there's the Hillary Clinton parallels, but an older AOC potentially, that kind of connection, or who knows. But not that AOC wants to burn it all down either, but she definitely is going to lead an opposition to the Trump administration here. Um, making that kind of connection, I do think there's a good shot that casual fans are going to be able to pick her out.
I mean, I hope that'd be great.
Yeah.
I guess one of
Yeah.
the last things we could talk about
Hmm.
is the people who don't ostracize themselves from fandom.
Hmm.
But they're gonna always meet people at a point when they just kind of go, "Well, this isn't for me anymore."
Yeah.
Um, plenty of good people who didn't make a big fuss who sort of said, "Well, Star Wars isn't for me anymore after 2012 when both Lucas left and Star Wars Legends got rebooted." It's like,
Yeah.
my the Star Wars I invested in, that's done.
Hmm.
Some people did get into the new stuff, of course, but other people are like, no, to me, that's the cutoff
Yeah.
date. Um, yeah, and I think that's another one of those interesting things. As long as you're honest, like I'm sure
Yeah.
there are plenty of people who are honest with themselves. Like, look, I am an original trilogy person. I like A New Hope and Empire. and I barely tolerate Return of the Jedi. And that's just who I am. I
Mhm.
just can't get into it. I can't get into the new stuff. Something about it just does not click in my brain
Mhm.
as art or whatever. Um, never got into the books. You know, you know, people stopped liking Star Wars. Everyone had their cutoff points. Like we're not, as long as
Mhm.
they're not jerks together. And it's sort of like, well, the magic's gone
Yeah.
for whatever reason. Some of that's age, just no longer young and youthful. Your tastes change over time. Some of that is just random taste. I hope the maturity of it is like the difference between as George Lucas didn't give me my blanket versus I just don't like George Lucas as an artist for whatever reason. He doesn't
Yeah.
make art I enjoy. Um, for whatever his reasons,
Mhm.
whatever your reasons, then it happens. It
Yeah.
happens.
It does.
There are people who felt that Return of the Jedi was a bit of a downgrade for Empire. It kind of lost a bit of its edge, and that's why they don't like it. People stopped liking Star Wars after Lucas left because they miss the Lucas weirdness and
Yeah.
the McClunkies and whatnot.
Yeah.
People kind of dropped off after the sequels because they really liked Rey, Finn, Poe, and Kylo, and they wanted that story to end a certain way, and it didn't.
Mhm.
Much as we get into Star Wars, sometimes what we get into Star Wars goes away or changes and
Yeah.
ends and evolves, and that shakes up who is in fandom, who's not in participating
Yeah.
actively in fandom. That's probably the word.
That's a way of putting it. Yeah.
That's who's maybe not participating actively anymore.
Mhm.
Um, you know, so I mean, I'm sure once High Republic ends, there are gonna be a lot of people who are like, the thing
Where do
I
we go now?
enjoyed the most about Star Wars is kind of over.
Yeah. That's
Like
gonna be
me.
me. I'm gonna actually. I'm gonna quit Iron Cat. No, I'm just kidding. I'm
They be
kidding.
a lot over here. I don't know, but I mean, but there will be people who are like that.
Yeah. Sure.
Um, you know, um, and I guess it also kind of, I think it depends on like how you got into Star Wars, but also like,
Mhm.
uh, um, what about Star Wars? You think that you value? Do you think Star Wars is no longer touching upon, etc.,
Yeah.
etc.? It's
Yeah.
interesting. Sort of like people kind of just drift away from religion because I don't know,
It's
it's just
true.
like just not doing it for them anymore
Yeah.
for whatever. So yeah,
Well.
I'll talk
Yeah.
about
No, it's interesting. Again, to bring up the parallel. I mean, that raises a few questions. Right? Is what gets people to stop engaging the conversation,
it.
to not want to go to cons? Like, what is it? What is actually
Not
involved in
enjoying the new
this?
stuff if there's new stuff.
So here's the interesting thing, and this is my question to Legends fans, right?
Hmm.
Do you need new material to come out that is grabbing you in order to continue part of the conversation?
That's true.
Or is it enough to say, yeah, I still engage these stories and reread these stories? There was a whole Legends con that happened. That was wonderful. And of course, those folks were, they were when they came on the show, and it was great. And of course, also the engaging canon as well. You know, there's that. Yeah, there's different reasons why people don't want to engage both online and in person anymore. A lot of it was the toxicity around the Last Jedi. They loved the Last Jedi, and people give them death threats, and they had to step away, and uh, or just it just completely turned them off the franchise entirely. Uh, that's unfortunate, but that's what happens, and that's why we also need to create better boundaries around this stuff. All
I
right.
mean, you're right. I mean, I always check out the Jedi Council Forum book section. There's still plenty of conversations today about
Mhm.
Jason Solo,
Yeah,
New Jedi Order. I mean, there are people talking
that's
about
great.
Jason Solo today.
Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just still debating whether or not he should have fallen to the dark side or not to this day.
Yeah.
Our friend Corey Datapad does
Mhm.
his Tap Transmissions podcast. It's all legend stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
he does canon material every now and then, but he mostly does talk about the Legends books. They're almost done with the post Endor stuff.
Nice.
So still talk. I mean, heck, I still talk about Legends. I've done comic reviews on this
Yeah.
very podcast
Legends
about
look back.
Legends Look Back. We're still got to do X-wing stuff. Um, we can one day, hopefully, maybe after
Mhm.
Celebration, no
Yeah,
promises, do a podcast with Dominic about the Thrawn trilogy to this
we'll see.
day.
Yeah.
So you're right. I think
Mhm.
it's you might not enjoy the newer stuff
Mhm.
for whatever reason, but you're still part of the conversation about
Mhm.
the stuff you've enjoyed and
Yeah.
have always enjoyed
Speaking of
forever.
which, Skyrim Clipster's got this question.
Yeah.
Very legends. It's a live question and now and I can't speak to it because I just don't know. Uh, you know, you know, who's stronger? This is this fun thing question. Nihilus or Malgus or Palpatine? I don't know. So what
Ooh,
do you think?
that's a toughie because I don't know they're all pretty power. I think Palpatine, especially if we count some of the stuff he did in Legends, but even canon. I think I think he could hold his own.
Hmm.
I think on like one-on-one he could hold his own. I think if it's like Nihilus and Malgus team up and take on Palpatine, I think Palpatine can have a hard time. I think he would still handle it because they're all pretty dark, powerful beings. I think Palpatine is like the best of his generation of Sith, and they're like the best of their generation of
Mhm.
Sith too.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I don't have a definitive answer. I'm afraid. That'd be hard.
I have a
I
bit of
get
a silly answer, but
I
I
could
think
I think
go ahead.
Nihilus and Malgus might pull it off,
Mhm.
but it's gonna be a battle. It's gonna be a hard fought battle.
I have a bit of a metatextual answer. Uh, Nihilus and Malgus are just characters. Palpatine is the archetype, not the archetype, the personification of evil. So, for narrative reasons, Palpatine would have to win,
That's true. Maybe. Although Nihilus and
unless
Malgus aren't that.
Nihilus and Malgus become heroes.
That's true. That's true. I don't know. It'd be hard. Actually, Miles and Malgus aren't that deep characters. They're very much personifications of different things,
Okay,
death and decay. Um.
definitely evil as a whole. Yeah,
So it.
fair,
Yeah.
interesting.
Be hard. But yeah, good question. Good question.
Yeah,
It's a fun conversation to
yeah,
have.
good. So yeah, well, like, yeah, having those kinds of conversations there. So, sometimes,
Not boring conversation.
not boring conversation. Interesting.
Haha.
I mean, that now I'm curious. Like, okay, yeah, this is Nihilus, the name, uh, name meaning nothingness. Malgus kind of just badness.
Well,
Like,
Nihilus doesn't even have like a body. He's kind of like a
mhm,
floating cloak and mask who's like
wow,
just dark spirit energy and who needs to feed off the wounds on the
yeah.
Force.
So,
And Malgus is a
mhm,
character who's like a couple hundred or thousand years old because he like refuses to die. So
mhm,
his anger really is keeping him alive, but he's like decaying,
yeah.
just a rotting corpse almost. And then eventually he's like, okay, I'm gonna die now. I'm dead.
I mean, is an interesting conversation that we can have next week. How are villains personifications of different concepts
I'll just
and
say this, Matthew.
yeah,
If you ever see a good cutscene movie theater of Knights of the Old Republic 2,
yeah,
highly recommend. There's a lot of
I should.
philosophical stuff about the Force in there
Mhm,
that, quite frankly, I think you would really enjoy,
yeah,
especially like some of the stuff Kreia brings up and what these things mean and whatnot.
well,
So
sure.
big, big.
Hmm.
I would highly recommend you check it out because
Yeah.
I think there would be stuff you would get a lot of good stuff out of.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. Um, but yeah. Anyway, yeah,
Uh, but
true.
yeah, I mean, kind of lost track of thought there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think you can always still stay part of the conversation. It might be a
Yeah.
little disappointing that, it's like a lot of people are talking about the new big thing, whether it be the Mandalorian Grogu or Andor,
Yep.
and you for whatever
Or
reason
Mask of Fear
or
or
Mask of
High
Fear
Republic finale
or
yeah,
yeah, and like maybe you don't enjoy it, so you might feel a little left out because
true.
you just can't get into it. But and the sad kind of thing is like as time more and more moves on, it's like I mean, Legend stuff is still relatively got a good, solid fan base enough to bring in new people, but
Hmm.
it definitely probably gets harder and harder to find. There are certain things in Legends even that are harder to talk about. Like you have like the big books, like the popular mainstream things,
Hmm.
like the Thrawn trilogy. Here's a great example of mainstream changing. Like you got like today the mainstream of Legends are the Thrawn trilogy, Plagueis, the Kenobi book, really anything that pops up in the Essential Legends collection.
Yeah.
good luck. Anyone who outside of the hardcore Legends fan know who Zek is. Do you know who Zek is? Does
Not
anyone
a
know who
clue.
Zek is? Yeah.
Not a clue.
Uh, he's one of the villains in the Kevin J. Anderson
I
Young
know the
Giant.
Grand Nagus. Grand
Oh yeah,
Nagus Zek.
different Zek. But he's a villain in the Young Jedi Knight series by
All right.
Kevin J. Anderson in the 90s, which is
Yeah.
almost impossible to find these days. It's really
Mhm.
hard, and it was like a young adult book series
I think
about
I had it. I think I gave it away.
about Jane and Jason Solo. They're growing up, they're learning
I
Jedi
think so.
stuff. Very cute, very
Mhm.
fun. Well, it's
Mhm.
very wacky, but like in a fun way, where it's like they're like, well, like one
Yeah.
story is about how they think Palpatine's returned for a third time, but it's not. It's just a bunch of Imperial Royal Guards
Mhm.
mixing and editing a bunch of recordings of him and trying to fool
Interesting.
everybody. It's really cute.
Yeah.
It's like it's for teenagers. Kind of in
Sure.
that age range. But it's like that's hard to find,
Mhm.
unfortunately. Things like New Jedi Order are pretty big still, so I think people
Yeah.
still look quite like that. But there's certainly certainly things that are going to be harder and harder to find. So I always feel bad for that, where it's like the records are dwindling, so you can't be part of those conversations.
Yeah. That's true too. I mean, they're all on digital.
Right? Some of them are.
Yeah, I guess.
Uh,
Yeah. Aren't they all on Kindle?
I
Yeah.
don't know. I think some of those things are harder
Yeah.
to
Even
find.
like like you're saying, the Essential Legends collection, they're releasing them now. That's the thing. Like Penguin Random House, they're just here you go. Nice new covers.
Hmm.
Uh Marvel releasing all these Legends comics.
That's always nice.
Yeah, nice cover. There you go. So yeah.
But yeah, I can't really think about anything else. I'll just kind of closing thoughts
Hmm.
of again, we want to be open as possible.
Hmm.
Star Wars,
Oh,
even engage talking about.
here we go.
Oh,
We're good. We're good. We're good. Keep going.
enjoy talking about it in like even a small way. As far as
Hmm.
I'm concerned, you're a Star Wars
Yeah.
fan.
Yeah.
Um, but again, I think it's important to acknowledge those differences of like,
Sure.
we can talk about Star Wars in a very different way than maybe your parents can, or your casual audience person can. But we must,
Hmm.
but also, it's like, hey, if you want to get into this, we'll help you, right? I think
Yeah.
that's another important thing to help your fellow casual fan get into the weeds of it all and
Hmm.
see where they want to go with it, and let their Star Wars adventure begin.
Yeah. There you go. So yeah, great conversation. I think. Yeah. I mean, here's an interesting thing. I'm gonna go to the soccer game in a few weeks. I'm gonna have friends and be like, "Yeah, what'd you think of Skeleton Crew? What'd you think of what are you looking for to Andor?" Um, so that there's different, and they're mainly original only folks because they're a bit older. So yeah, it's an interesting. Well, there you go. Thanks again, Skyrim, for the super chat. For the answers. With Star Wars all day. Old Republic is so cool. Old Republic, I mean, it's such a great era. That's the thing. It's coming back in canon soon. We know it is. They're so rich. Everything they've done. I mean, I've read again most of the main trilogy. Um, there we go. Got a question from Billy Sellers here. When is Skeleton Crew coming back again? I mean, it's on Disney Plus now. You can watch it. The story itself, I mean, they left a little bit of a hint at the end for season 2, but I don't know, Joel, what you think of this, but I think they wrapped it up the one and done season. It's nice that you can plot us. The great thing about that show is it was so well plotted and thought out that to say a one and done season, this is it. This is the story we got. I'm satisfied with one season of Skeleton Crew. It was great. I don't think it's coming back. I think the characters are coming back.
I hope
Uh,
so. Yeah.
they were great characters, great acting. So I think the characters are coming back in other Mandoverse shows and maybe the film, or the films. But yeah, I don't think there's going to be a Skeleton Crew season 2. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think there would be either, or I
Yeah,
think that if we are to find that out, I think it's not going to happen until after the Filoni movie's done. This particular chapter of the Mandoverse is wrapped up, and
Yeah.
then maybe they decide what to move on with. But yeah, I was satisfied with the full while that season ended. I thought it was just a good, fun, swashbuckling adventure.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, I can see again, later on, so we're coming back. Skeleton Crew is back, like in 10 years. But then they're adults, things like that. So, yeah, looking forward to that. But I think that's a good place to wrap things up. Thanks, everyone, especially for the Skyrim for the super chats and everyone else for chiming in the conversation. Great convo, great chat, great fandom discussion. This is what fandom is. We talk, we meet, get together. So yeah, thanks for joining us. Let us know what you thought of our conversation, what you think fandom is, what you think Star Wars fandom is, what you're looking forward to at Celebration. Check out Ash's panel. I forgot to mention that. I'll get the details again. Yapping about Mon Mothma, all about Mon Mothma. Talk about someone who's obsessed in the best way with Mon Mothma.
Yes.
There we go. Check that out if you're in Japan, and I do believe she's gonna get it onto her Mon Mothma Newsnet YouTube channel as well. And also check out our we'll get the plugs in a minute. But yeah, let us know what you thought of our conversation tonight. Yeah, the comment boxes, they ain't going anywhere. They're still there. Please do give those a look, give those a talk. And do give this video a like and a share and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Joel, another great conversation. Thanks for leading us through. Where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me at JID20234 on Blue Sky. Again, JID20234 on Blue Sky. Or, of course, Star Wars Underworld Discord server. Join the link below. We have game nights, movie nights, and all sorts of fun things happening.
There we go. You can find my personals, Instagram, Twitter, Instagram threads, and Blue Sky, MNEUG1138. Of course, and Twitter, NEUG485. Yeah, still Iron Cannon, Blue Sky, Iron Cannon Pod, Twitter, Instagram threads. Beaches Foodie on Instagram as well. Then yeah, the Taylor Swift panel from Toronto Comic Con. Taylor Swift on screen, so it was a little more topical. Did get into her music videos and other things, but Taylor Swift film star. Check that out on YouTube, likely on the Culture Slate YouTube channel. When we get that up, that's in the works. So I will definitely broadcast that, put that on blast. Yeah, and then check out different celebration offerings. If you're at Celebration, I know Dom will be there, Chris Abbott will be there, Hannah will be there. Feel free to say hi. They don't bite. They're very kind people. Give them a wave. Give them a wave. There we go. Yeah. So check that out, and of course keep locked on at the SW for everything that they'll be up to in Japan, and also Star Raptor, youtube.com/Star Raptor, and that's Star Raptor for everything they'll be up to out in Japan. This Wednesday on the Tractor Beam, speaking of Chris Abbott, High Republic Adventures number 16. We're going back to Ariadu, keeping it going, coming to an epic conclusion. The High Republic coming to an epic conclusion. So keep that locked this Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, right here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel and Facebook page and Twitch, and then Iron Cannon Twitch as well. And also it has its own Spotify and Apple podcast feed. So please do check that out. Next week, as promised, we are talking about villains in Star Wars. Joel, I'm asking you this right now. What are they representative of? What are they symbolic of, as well as archetypes and different things? Gonna be a fun, juicy good Lent discussion. There we go. Bring that in as well. So how they personification of evil and sin and their defeat. There we go. So yeah, please do join us next Monday night.
They are a personification of humans.
Yes, personification of us. They are we. The anti-hero. There we go. Maybe not the anti-hero, the villain. That's okay. Anyways, check that out next Monday night at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, right here on the Underworld YouTube channel, Facebook, Twitch, and Iron Cannon Twitch, and then on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I got to throw this one up. I got to eat something and take it easy. Joel, it's been fun. Until next week, let's blow this thing and head home.